Andrew Urquhart with you on the program, making a list and checking it twice. And before I get in even more trouble on today's program, we're not talking about Santa. Okay, gosh, now I've said Santa. I'm probably in trouble with a whole bunch of people. But no, as we head towards Christmas, a different type of list, nothing to do with naughty and nice and everything to do with books. Joining us on the program now is literary correspondent Elizabeth Kirkby-McLeod. Kia ora, good morning.
Good morning. You're lucky I'm still here after you said the S word.
After you, exactly. Although it is a time of the year for making lists. Personally, I'm a list guy. Any time of the year is a good time for a good to-do list. But the topic we're talking about today is book lists. It seems to be the time of the year where everybody's doing a top 10 or a best of 2024, the book lists as we head towards Christmas. What's behind this, Libby? What's behind these book lists?
Yeah, well, I love these things. Let's just start. I love And so this morning, just off the top of my head, I thought of what are some of the book lists that I know of. So Goodreads, Barack Obama, the former president of America, does his book list.
Yep.
The New York Times does their best book list. Time Magazine, Curtis, which is a book review site, Oprah, LitHub. And my personal favorites are the New Zealand Listener, which does like 2 or 3 weeks worth of best of lists.
Wow.
Kennedy today around this time of year releases its book special issue, which is just all about books. So yeah, from here on, now that I've brought it up, your listeners are just going to notice them everywhere.
Yeah.
Best of books. And I think it's because we're coming to the end of the year, right? So most of these are going to be best of the books written this year.
Mm-hmm.
But hold up for a minute, because we know from the United Nations body, UNESCO, that there's about 2.2 million new books published each year.
Wow.
So it's really not going to be the best of all the books written this year, is it? It's going to be the best of the ones that the people putting the list together have read.
Yeah, exactly. And hey, we can see how that would work with Barack Obama. He's probably either read or written the books that are on his particular list. Interested to know, though, that it isn't just a pure retail thing. I mean, cynically, I thought, oh, yeah, this would be like Whitcoulls or Paper Plus saying, here's 10 books that you have to buy off us to read over summer. And possibly there's a little bit around the sort of the retail space on that, pushing us in a certain direction. Hey, these are the best sellers. Get on board with this new hot thing. But it's also, I'm glad to see that it's also reviewers. There is a little bit of critical analysis here in what a good book looks like compared to the, as you say, millions that get published every year.
Yeah, so they're kind of interwoven, aren't they? Because if something like the New York Times says that your book is one of their top 5 fiction books of the year, then you're also likely to be a pretty good seller.
Yep.
So they do interact with each other a little bit, these lists. And I haven't even talked about genre lists, right? The best 10 thrillers, the best 10 romance books, the best 10 books that star Amish people. Get into lots of different sub ones, but yes, it's the ones I like are where an editor or a group of reviewers get together and they put together their favorite books of the year. But that's their favorite books, right?
Yep.
What I like them for is using them to find books that I might have missed, because out of that 2.2 million books, I'm maybe reading 30 to 40 of them a year, right? So I'm missing a lot of them. And so I like them to find books that I think I would like, but I just happen to have missed, or maybe I remember them coming out, but I never got it, and it's a reminder to read them. But I think it's cool to think about what your best books of the year were. Now, unlike the list that we're going to see in public, which are almost always new releases, so books published this year, best of this year.
Yep.
Tend to just read. I don't know about you. Maybe you do go to the bookshop every Friday and buy a new book, but I don't tend to buy and read just books published this year. But there are books I've read this year that would be on the best of the ones I've read this year. So I'd encourage people to think of what their best book list is for the year, the books that really stand out, and then what it is about them that they like, because that'll help them think about the books they would like to read next year.
Wow. I think that's good. Let's not delegate this to the New York Times and Barack Obama. We can do our own book lists as we wrap up the end of the year. And look, I think this is a good thing to be doing, and it works in both hemispheres. It's one of the few things, I think, that works in both hemispheres, because as we get to the end of the calendar year, it does give us an idea of either what books we might want to read over summer, or in the Northern Hemisphere, when the weather outside is frightful, what good book we want to be curled up on the couch reading, right?
Yes, absolutely. I thought that too. For us, it may be slightly different books because I think people like to read different things, perhaps lying on the beach than they do in front of the fire.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that people curate from these lists. It can feel overwhelming if you get a list of, say, the best 100 books of the year put in front of you. That's going to be overwhelming. So curate. Don't feel overwhelmed. Remember that other than the Bible, there isn't any books written that you really have to read. Just because someone says these are the 10 books you shouldn't miss from the year, you can say, actually, I am going to miss all 10 of those because that's okay. It's not, but you might be able to find something on one of those lists that you love. You might be open to a new author who will become one of your most favorite authors. That's happened to me where, a book looks like something I want to read and then suddenly I want to read everything that person has ever written.
Yeah.
So they're a good way to expand what you're reading to quickly and easily get a list of things that you might not have noticed, and you might not have read every issue of the New York Times this year and all of their book reviews.
Yeah.
So you might have missed you, and it's an easy, handy place to gather them together. But just remember, it is supposed to be enjoyable reading. Don't feel overwhelmed. Don't feel under any obligation. Just because Barack Obama says it's the book to read doesn't mean you have to read it.
Exactly. Under no compulsion in that regard. It is a great way of expanding our horizons and, as you say, drawing in perhaps books that we may have missed otherwise. But I think it's also a wonderful way of communicating stuff, because for example, if I put together a top 10 books of the year and you put together a top 10 books of the year, I think it's a window into the soul, really, isn't it? That if there's people in our lives who we go, hey, what would be your top 10 books of the year? It's a great conversation starter. It's a great way of sharing a love of good books. And hey, if there's people in your life whose views and opinions you respect, perhaps it's a way of swapping lists, of reading books together, of sharing some of the things that we've enjoyed and passing that blessing on to others, perhaps.
Yes, absolutely. I think even if they have views that you might not necessarily share, it's really interesting to see what it is that they're consuming, right? And I think it shows that you care about a person. Just in a person, if you say to a person, hey, what's your best 3 books that you've read this year? I'd love to know what you've enjoyed.
Yep.
And I'm going to go and get one of them and read it, and then we can talk about it. And it would be great too. You might be surprised to find that what is on your list is also on somebody else's list. What I love is when someone brings out a list and I can sit there very smugly and go, oh yes, read that. Oh yes, read that. Oh look, all of their books. Aren't I just as literary as they are?
Exactly. And Libby, I mean this as a sincere compliment. You're perhaps slightly above average in the bookishness. Even if you don't go to a bookshop every Friday to buy a new book, I'm sure that there's people like you that keep bookshops in business in some ways. Hey, Libby, thank you so much. We will be looking out for, and we will probably see more of these top 10 or popular books of 2024. We'll see these lists everywhere, but I do love your idea of, hey, let's write lists of our own and perhaps share those lists with other people. Let's encourage a love of good books this year. Libby, thanks for what you do. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.